Sunday the 18th of June, and it's been a couple of weeks since I last spoke with you, so welcome back and thank you for joining me again. It's, as I say, the 18th of June. It is incredibly warm, as you can probably see from my hair. I'm finding these, I don't like very hot weather. I don't mind it being warm, I just don't like it being very hot. And we're currently somewhere 28, 29 degrees Celsius, so that's pretty much as hot as it gets in England during the summer. I could do with it being 5 degrees cooler and I'd be very comfortable then. But I've had to turn the fan off because the sound interferes with the microphone on the iPad, so I thought you'd rather hear me than a buzzing sound keeping me cool, so excuse me if I look rather hot and flushed. My name's Gerard, or Boniface, or Peter. I'm a former monk, a former bus driver. I live in Abingdon, in Oxfordshire. In the UK, it's about 7 miles south of the city of Oxford, and I work in the city. And I am a crocheter, a knitter, a sewer, a weaver, and anything else that's vaguely craft fibre related. Sorry, I smiled because earlier today I was watching The Grocery Girls, which are Canadian sisters who have a podcast on knitting and all things fibre. And they referred to crocheters as hookers, so it just made me smile. I suppose technically, literally, we are hookers, but not quite in the sense that that word has sometimes. So it's been a fairly busy couple of weeks. Not so much at work, that's been fairly quiet, in fact, possibly too quiet. But I'm hoping that there'll be developments in the next couple of weeks that I'll be able to talk about on here. Sorry to be so mysterious, but sometimes it's best not to talk about things until something more concrete is in place. The hot weather does make it difficult. I find it very difficult when it's really hot to focus on anything particularly complicated. So I've been doing fairly simple things, but I've had a few finished objects. One which I gave as a present yesterday to someone I know who watches this podcast, and she has taken some photos of it, so I will put them in here. And the pattern is basically meant to symbolise falling leaves. I made it using one of the Woolcraft cakes, so it's an Aran weight yarn, 80% acrylic and 20% wool. What kind of wool isn't specified. I used a 6mm crochet hook as well. The yarn recommends 5mm, but I like shawls to be a little bit more lacy than substantial. So crocheting already gives quite a dense fabric anyway, so using a larger hook size just makes it a little bit less dense. It will be very warm come the winter, but it's her birthday in the middle of June, and woolen gifts and June don't really go that well together. But anyway, so I know she liked receiving it, and I'm very pleased to have been able to make it for her. I've made another shawl, which is going to be a Christmas present. I'm not going to say for whom, so this will be a surprise for them. This is called it's got various different names. I think on Ravelry the pattern is called Lost Souls, which I find a bit depressing. I call it my All Souls scarf, and as you can see, it's a series of skulls, which might seem an odd subject matter for a shawl, but I'm assured that some people are quite into that kind of thing, and actually I don't have any particular hang-ups about that kind of thing. This was in, sorry, this is also a Woolcraft cake, and this also used a size 6 crochet hook, and the colourway for this one, I think, was Blueberry Kiwi. I think the colours are meant to represent the colours of those fruits, so though I'm not sure that the teal in the middle is quite one thing or the other. Oh, sorry. It has quite a halo on it. The wool provides quite a halo effect on the... I don't know if you can see. I'll try and bring it a little closer to the camera. You can see there's just... Yes, you can see the little fibre surrounding... and it's incredibly soft and squishy. I didn't block Wendy's shawl because I didn't think it needed it as much. This one I will block because the motifs are much more... They're much lacier, and I think the lacier items do stand being blocked more. So I will wash this with my lavender wool soak, probably with the socks, because I've started the second sock of the red striped pair of socks. So I should probably wash those when they're done as well, and they will all be blocked together. And that it will just mean that I can dry, as it dries I can stretch it out and it will open up the lace pattern inside there much better, so that when the recipient is wearing it, it will drape much more. I don't know why. I must look into the reasons why. It's possibly got something to do with the fact that when the yarns are put through spinning machines, as every yarn is, then they acquire a certain amount of the spinning oil in them, which is that thing that makes some yarns feel quite crunchy when they're balled up. I'll be talking about these shortly, but this is quite a crunchy. You can actually hear it. It's slightly crunchy. I mean, some of that's it moving on here, but some of it is actually the yarn itself crunching. Soaking them relaxes everything from both the spinning and then the crocheting or the knitting, and allows you to stretch it out to the dimensions, the finished dimensions you actually want. Sometimes you don't want to stretch it out, sometimes you want it to be quite a compact dimension. Sometimes with the lace scarves and shawls in particular, you want to stretch it right out as far as it will go. And by softening it that way and drying it out and blocking it, you create this much drapier fabric overall, and it loses that crunchiness. It doesn't stop it being soft, it's just, I think, a byproduct of the spinning process. I do have another finished object, which I don't know if I showed the last time. Rachel, who worked with us for a few years, has recently moved on to a new role with Mercedes Formula One, which is obviously a major opportunity for her to be involved in the global brand. She's a graphic designer, so it's a fantastic opportunity for her. We're desperately sorry to see her go, but really very pleased for her for the opportunity that she has to move on with her career. So I'll put it. I made another shawl for her. I'll put in a picture here just in case I didn't show it you previously. The butterfly shawl. I think I've not quite finished it. I was wondering whether or not to put the extra line of granny square style border on. But she was very pleased with this, and I wrapped it up for her in a nice presentation box and some lavender inside as well, so that was all very popular. Very much appreciated by her. But I have a third finished object, so this is... I'm beginning to think, oh, my life is kind of careening out of control, but I've got a third finished object, and this is the dungarees for one of my babies in the family that's expected in September, and they are just the most adorable little dungarees. So they're made up of individual granny squares, so there were 40 individual granny squares, and then they were seamed. How was it put together? It was, yes, that's right, it was 4 rows of 5, so this half before it was sewn together around the leg, and then this half was a second one, and then the legs had a border put on of the four colours, and then the two panels were sewn together, and the top had a border put on, and then the back was sewn together, and the two legs were sewn together. So that was the basic construction. And then I was going to put buttons on, but I thought I wouldn't need to bother. Although the dungarees are designed to come up to about here on the child, so that's why they've got quite short straps, and their head will easily fit into there, so it's not going to be an issue getting them on, their body rather, and they'll easily be able to get their arms in. That's why I didn't worry about the buttons so much. And I thought it would be more robust if they were actually directly connected to the dungarees, rather than buttoned. There were 476 ends that had to be woven in on this. Oh my lord, it was such an enterprise. I mean, each square has 3 colours: the starting circle, and then the inner round, then there's the middle round, and then there's the outer round. So that's 6 ends for each square. Then each square had to be sewn to its neighbour in both directions. So I sewed basically rows of 5 and then, rows of 4 I sewed, and then connected 5 rows of those 4 together. And then the the front seam had to be sewn in, then the back seam sewn in, and then the leg seam sewn in, all of which were done separately, so that was 2 for each of those, and then the ends for the, what are these called, straps, I don't know, braces, I guess, had to be sewn in as well. So, very simple construction, but my goodness me, such a lot of ends to weave in. But I do like the finished product. I really think that these are really quite snazzy, and I think there's a matching hat goes with them, and I think I've got enough yarn to make the matching hat. And then I have to make another pair, because there are 2 babies expected, so I can't just make 1, I've got to make 2. So I will do the second one, and that's going to be an awful lot more ends to sew in. So that's it with my finished objects. I haven't really made any progress at all on any other knitting or crocheting, but I have started work on a quilt. Friends of mine are getting married later this year, and one of the friends is from Dresden, and so I thought it would be really nice to make a Dresden plate quilt. Ha 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 ha, nice and simple. For those of you who are not familiar with the idea, a Dresden plate quilt is made up of 20 of these 18-degree plates sewn together in a circle, like this, all the way around, with a circle in the middle to cover up where they all join, and then that is appliqued to a background square, and the squares are then joined together to make the quilt. So, the first step is to cut out 20 of those for each of the plates you're going to make. And I had a jelly roll, and a jelly roll, for those of you not familiar with quilting, a jelly roll is a strip of fabric, and this strip is 2.5 inches deep, and it is, I think, 42 inches long, and there are usually 20 or 30 in the roll, and it comes all rolled up, and I'll put a picture in here, but some of you may have seen on Instagram me unfolding the roll. So the first job was to lay out 4 strips and sew them together to make a deep strip, and with a 1/4 inch seam it means that you basically got 8.5, 9 inches, between 9 and 9.5 inch deep strip that's 42 inches long, and from that you then go along inverting this and cutting out the triangles. They're not quite triangles because they've got flat edges at both ends, but it's trapezoidal, I guess. No, sorry, not trapezoidal, it will be the other one, rhomboidal. No, it is trapezoidal, isn't it? Yes, it's an irregular trapeze, so it's trapezoidal. Sorry, my geometric. So you end up with, so I did this to all 20 So there were 5 strips of 42, and then I was able to cut about 20 of those triangles. I actually used a slightly smaller plate, but it was still 18 degrees. And there are 20 of them, because 18 degrees times 20, of course, is 360 degrees, which is a full circle. So you end up with lots and lots and lots of these. And so you can see here where they've all been sewn together, 1/4 inch seams. And then at the very end, for each and every one, they were actually this way round. You just sew the two, so you would fold. Imagine this is actually opened out, so that's the thick end of the wedge. You fold it this end to this corner to that corner with this straight across folded in half, and then sew across the top. And then when you flip that through, you get this lovely triangular point. So it's quite a lot of work goes into it, and then I've sewn half a dozen of them together so far. Got a little bit creased, but I can flatten that out with a steam iron. And I'm also doing what's known as a sunburst. So between each one, I'm folding a tiny triangle of fabric, fold it in half vertically, and then this stitches along here, the long edge along here, and it produces these points. And then a yellow circle will be put in the middle, and it will look just like a sunburst at the centre of the plate. Normally it would just be a circular disc, but with these triangles it makes it into a sunburst. I just thought it was something a little bit extra. Of course it's more work, but there you go, that's life. So in order to make the plates, I needed a backing colour that would not detract from the beautiful multicoloured jelly roll. So I went out with a couple of friends, and we went to Mason's and had a look around, and I thought that this grey, rather than cream, I thought this grey would actually go better, and they both agreed, and so I bought that. However, I'm not sure that I will be using this grey on this, because I'm not sure that this is going to be the quilt I'm going to be making for this couple. And I wanted a plain back so it would have a black background behind it. But I've also got what's known as a layer cake. And a layer cake is 42 squares, 10 by 10. 10 inches by 10 inches. And this has got some wonderful fabric. So this is garden. So it's lots of different flowers, fabrics, quite muted pastel-y tones. Vintage looking almost, which I think might actually make a slightly bigger quilt. That one will only be a 2 by 2 with an extra square, which I'll use for something else. This one would be 2 by 3, and the overall dimensions of the blocks that make up that quilt will be about 20 inches square, whereas this one would be about 25 to 29 inches square, depending upon the finished size. So I think this one would make a better quilt for a married couple, so I will try out the techniques on this particular jelly roll and maybe make some mini quilts for the babies that are coming, because one, or even table runners, or just something different. So I'm in two minds about all that, but I'm quite enjoying the process. It's involved, but I watched the Missouri Star Quilt Company podcast. Well, it's not so much podcast as quilting tutorials. Jenny Doan, I've mentioned her before, and I just find her approach is very pragmatic and very down to earth, and very much a case of, you can do this, it's not as difficult as it looks, let's break it down into individual steps, and actually each step is easily manageable by a fairly competent person. Even an inexperienced sewer like me, as long as you understand the basic principles of what you're doing, it's quite easy to follow along and do what she does. Excuse me. So, I'm not quite sure I've remembered where I was going with that now. Oh well, not to worry. It will come back to me. So, I'm quite enjoying the process of making this. Oh yes, that was it. She's very much a believer in not quite conveyor belt, but production line manufacture of quilts. So her approach is sew all your Jelly Roll strips in one sitting. So you do 5 lots of the 4 strips. Then you cut out all your individual templates. Then you fold in half and sew across the top of every single one using a technique she calls chain piecing, where you sew one and instead of cutting that off and then going back to the machine with the next one and thereby wasting an awful lot of thread between, once you've completed one you just go and do the next and you go and do the next and you go and do the next and you just end up with a long string of them with very little thread in between, and then you just cut them into individuals. So her whole approach is this kind of production line manufacturing technique, and I find it very simple because you get into a rhythm of doing each step, and it's quite nice, even for a slightly more complicated construction like the Dresden plate. Each individual step, as I say, is not very difficult, and if you're just doing the same step over and over and over and over and over for an hour or two, then that just becomes the kind of, not mindless, but you're not having to give your full attention to it, so you can listen to something on the radio or watch something on the television. Well, not so much watch, because you do have to watch what you're sewing, but listening to audiobooks or a podcast or whatever is entirely manageable while you're carrying out this sewing. So it's quite a therapeutic process still, and it's that repetitive exercise that just makes something more enjoyable. The other great thing about quilting is it's even more than knitting and crocheting. For us men, although there aren't that many of us relative to the number of women doing these activities, it's a great opportunity to have lots and lots of tools. So I've already shown this Dresden plate tool, which allows me to make plates from 1 inch to 10 inches, which including the 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is always very important to remember that you have to have a seam allowance, which this effectively would make a 9.5 inch plate, because with the 1/4 inch seam allowance from 10 inch at each end, then you're down to 9.5 inches. I have an equilateral triangle wedge, so the 2 degrees are 60 degrees here, and that's 60 up here, but it's got a straight edge so that you can lie it between however big, however deep your strip is. If it's 1 inch, 2 inch, you always lay this on the edge, and then you just cut along as necessary from that point, or you move it down and keep on going. So it allows me to make quite useful equilateral triangles of anything up to, I think, 6 inches. So again, it would be a 5.5 inch triangle with the 1/4 inch seam allowance at each end. And I also bought a semicircle template. And again, this allows for circles from 2 inches to 10 inches. And what you actually do is fold the fabric in half and put the fold line along here. And I have a special little cutter with a little blade which will actually run around inside the semicircle, and then when you open it out, because you've cut from along the fold, you'll actually have a full circle, so you're only having to cut half of the circle to get the circle. This, of course, will be very useful for making the circles that go at the centre of the Dresden plates, which is why I bought it, but it will have many other applications as well. I mean, there are some quilts I've seen Jenny make where if you fold this in half and cut a 5 inch circle, or say a 3 inch circle, you end up with a circular bit of fabric, but also a square fabric with a hole in it, and I've seen her just attach either or both to a plain backing fabric, and then you've got circles and counter circles of contrasting fabrics. So again, you know, there's lots of different ways you can use these tools, and for, I think, probably women as well. I can't speak for women, but I can speak for me as a man. Having little tools and gadgets to use is part of the joy of what I do. So it's always a pleasure to be able to play with the latest toy. In terms of acquisitions in beyond those tools, going back to, I've just remembered I've only brought half the, if you just bear with me a second. I want to make the second pair of dungarees, but they didn't have the same yarn available, so I bought a different yarn. This is the Stylecraft Wonder Soft for babies. The label's a little bit kind of broken, but anyway. So again, I've got... It's going to be very similar. I've got the main colour as red, and there is, as with this one, there is a kind of lilac purpley colour. But it didn't. This used denim, which is a kind of variegated blue yarn. This one, and also kind of, I suppose we call it mint, very fresh looking mint green. This one will actually have cream and this baby blue, so it's a slightly different look, which is fine. But they're all these the Stylecraft Wonder Soft 100% acrylic for babies. So that's one acquisition, and the other acquisition I made is more because there was an opportunity. As part of the kind of yarn shop day that Masons had about a month ago, they also took delivery of a new line from West Yorkshire Spinners called their Aire Valley Essentials DK. You may remember I've had Aire Valley Aran before, which I've made the socks from, the green and the red striped socks that I've been making previously, but this is a DK, and this is what I was talking about before, the slightly crunchy yarn. This is 80% acrylic, 20% wool. It doesn't say what type of wool, though most of their wool seems to be blue-faced Leicester. But this, sorry, it's 25, I don't know what I'm talking about. This is 75% wool, 25% nylon. It was the Woolcraft Cakes that was the 80-20. Rather annoyingly, again, with West Yorkshire Spinners, they don't actually say the names of the colours of their yarn. And in fact, I've been on their website, and I can't even see these on the West Yorkshire Spinners website. I've looked on other people's websites who stock these yarns, and they're not available on most of them. So this is a fairly new line, and it was introduced with... The shops were able to buy it at reduced half price, basically, so £2.50 a ball instead of £5 a ball. Most shops are now selling it at full price, £5, but Masons are very good, and they're selling it at the half price until that particular batch runs out, at which point it will then revert to the full price, because that's how much they'll have to pay when they want to restock. So I bought 5 balls of this. I suppose we call it aqua. It's very pale, greeny blue colour. Possibly because I'm wearing green, it's coming across slightly greener, but it's not as green as what I'm wearing. It's a much bluer green than that. That's going to be the main body of what I want to make. And I've got these 4 colours, which I am going to call Honey and Bottle Green, Sage and Mint, just because that's what they look like to me. And these will be the accent colours against this body colour. So those are the colours acting together. I think you can just about see the different colours together. And what I'm hoping to make is this cardigan. I've got to do a little bit of work. This is actually a crocheted cardigan. I don't know if you can see the level of detail on here. This is a paid-for advert, so I can't really talk about the inner pages very much because they've got the details on. But you can see it's got quite a wide button band and waistband, which is added at the end. It's a top-down construction, arms and front and back made separately. It's the problem I've got is that the pattern talks about a sport weight yarn, which is kind of halfway between it's 6 ply, it's halfway between 4 ply and the DK, which is 8 ply. So the quantities are not going to be quite the same, but I think I'm just going to play it by ear. I'm going to be using a slightly bigger. It's the other thing. This cardigan has 7-inch positive ease, in which case, if you make a 42-inch chest version, for example, then it actually has in real life a 49-inch chest. So it's a baggy cardigan, and it's intended to be a baggy cardigan. So I don't think it's going to matter massively. I just won't be making the very larger sizes because then they'd be massively oversized. Sorry, I'm getting awfully warm, as you can probably see. So I'm quite looking forward to getting to grips with that. And so the kind of where this is kind of heather grey, I'll be using this aqua style colour, and then the 3 accent colours. And I think possibly I may even make a contrasting colour band with this mint. So then the main body of the cardigan will be one colour, but the button band may be this. I'm not fully decided on that yet. I'm just going to play around with a few ideas, see how they work, see what I think, because if I don't like the way they're working, I can just use a different colour anyway. So that's not a project I'm going to be starting immediately. I bought the wool now because it's half price, and it's there for when I do want to make that. I'm going to be concentrating on finishing a couple of the baby things, finishing those dungarees, and then I can move on to making something for me. So that's basically it in terms of acquisitions, works in progress, finished objects. So the only thing left to say, and I realise this is only a half-hour production. I didn't want to leave another week without having a conversation with you. I think there is one thing actually. The last time I spoke, we just had the Manchester bombing, and obviously since then we've also had the terrorist attack on London Bridge when people were killed. We've had our general election. We've had a terrible loss of life at the Tower Block fire in London. And in all of these situations, two things have really stood out for me. The first is the incredible dedication, courage, bravery, and desire to deal with whatever the situation is that is confronting the emergency services. Their response times have been impressive. The London Bridge attack, within 8 minutes of the first incident occurring, the police had neutralised, i.e. shot, the attackers. So they had received a telephone call, raced to the scene, identified the perpetrators and neutralised them, all within 8 minutes. And that's a massively impressive speed of response and professional, accurate response. When their hearts must have been racing, they would be seeing things which none of us would ever want to see. That, equally with the Tower Block fire, 6 minutes from receiving the call, there were fire crews arriving at the Tower Block trying to deal with what was frankly a terrifying situation. In the words of the commander of the London Fire Brigade, a fire that she has never in all her career seen before. And so therefore, it's likely none of the other firefighters who attended the scene had seen before, and yet they still ran into a burning building, assisted people getting out, did everything they could to save life and reduce the death toll. And, in the midst of the horror and the anger and the desperation of the situation, it's good that we can actually recognise the great dedication, as I say, and courage of our emergency services, be they paramedics, be they the doctors and nurses back at the hospitals dealing with people who are in high states of trauma, with serious injuries and all the rest. And the other side of the whole thing, which was kind of evidenced by the concert at Old Trafford Cricket Ground after the Manchester bomb, but has been evidenced all the way through, is the resilience, the sense of unity, the sense of we will not allow these things to overcome us, of the communities involved. You know, we had 2 major terrorist incidents during our general election campaign, and still we had a general election. Everything went smoothly. The polls opened, people had their democratic say, normal life carried on. And in the midst of all the negative, anger, fear, seeing the terrible scenes that we see, knowing the terrible loss of life and injuries caused, I think we should take some comfort that our communities, our national identity, our sheer bloody-mindedness just to get on with life and not let these things win, overpower us, drag us down. I think we should all take some comfort and support from that as well. And where we can, be that help to those in need and support those who work to keep us safe every day of the year. So I thought I'd just mention that because I think we can get too bogged down by the negative side of these things, that sometimes we need to see the great good in these incidents as well, and the response that we can have as a community, as a nation, and as individuals to such evil occurrences. Anyway, so sorry for getting heavy again, but I just felt that was a positive, important thing to say. So that's it for this week. It's nearly 40 minutes, so I'm kind of on my target length. I get in trouble if I go too short. You know who I'm talking about. I hope to get some more work done this week, although the weather forecast is for yet more heat and sunshine for the rest of the week. And I know I sound like a Jeremiah, but if it could just stay around 23, 24 degrees, I'd be happy. But we're looking at 27 to 30 degrees for the rest of the week, and I'm just thinking I'm going to melt in this kind of weather. Anyway, enjoy the sun, enjoy the summer. It doesn't last very long. In a week's time, we'll already have passed Midsummer's Day, and the nights will be drawing in, as my father would say. And stay safe, stay happy, and thank you for joining me, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.